For more than 6 centuries, the book has waited in silence, not in a ruined temple, not in a sealed tomb, but in a climate-controlled library, catalogued, photographed, and studied by experts who still cannot read it. Its pages are real, its ink is real, its parchment is medieval. And yet the language inside it appears to belong nowhere. The plants look almost familiar until they do not. The star diagrams suggest astronomy until the symbols drift beyond recognition. Women rise from strange green baths and tubes like a memory from a civilization history never properly recorded. And line after line, page after page, the script continues with a confidence that feels impossible to fake. Then came the machines, not monks, not codebreakers from wartime archives, not one more eccentric amateur with a homemade cipher wheel. This time, break time, modern computational models were turned toward the manuscript. Pattern recognition systems, natural language algorithms, statistical analyses, and later, the new generation of AI tools that promised to find order where human eyes had failed. Online, the claim spread with explosive force. The impossible text had finally begun to yield. Headlines hinted at translation. Viral videos hinted at warning. Forums whispered about forbidden knowledge, lost science, even something not entirely human. But inside the world of scholarship, the reaction was not triumph. It was hesitation. Because if AI had really seen something inside the Voynich Manuscript, then one of history's most stubborn enigmas might finally be opening. But if AI had only generated a convincing illusion of meaning, break time 05s. Then the world was staring at something just as unsettling, a machine powerful enough to make uncertainty look like revelation. And that was the real danger, because the question was no longer just what the manuscript says. The question was whether anyone, human or machine, actually understands what they are looking at. So when the newest AI systems were pointed at the most unreadable book on Earth, did they find a lost voice from the 15th century, or did they awaken a mystery that was never meant to be solved? The object itself is not a legend. It is a real illustrated codex, commonly called the Voynich Manuscript, held today at Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. Yale's catalog identifies it as a cipher manuscript written in an unidentified language or script, break time .05s with botanical and scientific drawings across almost every page. The library records it as a manuscript of 102 folios plus a paper leaf, with numerous foldouts and several missing leaves. Physical evidence that this was a substantial, carefully planned artifact, not a modern internet myth. Its modern history is also documented. The manuscript is associated with Emperor Rudolf II's court in Central Europe, later passed through learned hands including Athanasius Kircher, and was acquired in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich from the Jesuit college at Frascati near Rome. It eventually reached Yale in 1969 through H.P. Krauss. That chain is incomplete, but it is not imaginary. There is a real provenance trail, however broken, stretching from early modern Europe to an American research library. Break time 05s. The parchment has also been radiocarbon dated. A frequently cited analysis of the vellum places the animal skin used for the manuscript between roughly 1404 and 1435-438 with high probability. That matters because it anchors the physical substrate in the early 15th century. But even that result comes with caution. Radiocarbon dating measures the age of the parchment material, not the exact moment the ink was applied, and parchment could have been stored before use. In other words, the dating strongly supports a medieval origin for the object, but it does not instantly decode its content. The manuscript's illustrations are usually grouped into broad content zones: botanical imagery, astronomical or astrological diagrams, biological or balneological scenes, cosmological foldouts, pharmaceutical imagery, break time .05s, and text-heavy recipe-like pages. Scholars can describe these sections with confidence because they are visible. What remains unresolved is what those images actually signify within the system of the book itself. Most important of all, there is no broadly accepted decipherment of the Voynich Manuscript. Yale's own catalog notes that although many people have claimed solutions, the text for the most part remains an unsolved puzzle. That single fact is the ground beneath every theory, every documentary, and every viral AI headline. Where scholarship becomes divided is not over whether the manuscript exists, but over what kind of thing it is. Some researchers argue the writing system represents a genuine language, either encoded or written in an otherwise unattested script. Others think it may be a constructed language. Break time E05s, a highly unusual cipher or a hybrid system that does not map neatly onto any known linguistic tradition. The debate persists because the text behaves in ways that seem organized, but not in ways that have yielded an agreed translation. Computational studies have deepened that tension. Statistical research has found that the distribution of words in the manuscript shows non-random structure comparable in some respects to real human languages. Another study argued that less probable words in the text behave in ways similar to natural language word systems, suggesting informational organization rather than meaningless noise. These papers are significant because they push back against simplistic claims that the manuscript is just random gibberish. But neither paper claimed a translation. Neither paper identified the author. Break time 05s. Neither paper solved the text. They showed structure, not meaning. There is also debate over attribution. Earlier generations tried to connect the manuscript to Roger Bacon, but the early 15th century parchment makes that old theory extremely difficult to sustain. Likewise, Theories tying the manuscript to specific courts, regions, or authors continue to circulate, but none has gained universal acceptance. Its first century and a half remain especially murky. Beyond scholarship lies the wider mythology. The manuscript has been described as an alchemical manual, a medical compendium, a women's health text, a memory system, a secret cipher book, a ritual text, a hoax, and especially in internet culture. Evidence of knowledge so strange it must have come from somewhere outside known history. Break time 05s. That is where speculation must be clearly separated from evidence. There is no verified evidence that the Voynich Manuscript records extraterrestrial contact. There is no accepted scientific announcement that an AI system has fully decoded it. And there is no scholarly consensus that the book contains a forbidden warning hidden from the public. Those ideas belong to the realm of imaginative interpretation, fringe theorizing, and viral storytelling, not established fact. And yet, the mystery does not collapse under caution. It deepens. Because the Voynich Manuscript is not merely unreadable, it is unreadable in the wrong way. A fake, if carelessly made, should fray under inspection. Random symbols should break statistical rhythm. Illustrations invented without system should drift into decorative nonsense. Break time 05s. But the Voynich Manuscript refuses to behave so simply. Its script repeats with apparent rules. Certain patterns cluster in particular sections. Some glyph groups appear frequently, others rarely. The visual program of the manuscript is strange, but it is not chaotic. It feels authored, intentional. Designed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, even if no one since has been able to follow the plan. That is the anomaly. If it is a hoax, it is one of the most disciplined hoaxes in manuscript history. If it is meaningful, then it has hidden that meaning with extraordinary durability. And if it belongs to a real knowledge tradition, then that tradition either vanished, was disguised, or survives in a form modern scholars have not recognized. The images only intensify the tension. The plants do not match simple herbals. The bathing figures do not sit comfortably inside ordinary devotional art. The fold-out cosmological pages feel too elaborate to dismiss, yet too alien to explain. Page after page creates the same psychological effect. Recognition constantly interrupted by distortion. The viewer feels close to understanding, then suddenly very far away. Missing leaves make the silence worse. Gaps in the structure suggest lost context. Perhaps a key section, perhaps explanatory text, perhaps nothing decisive at all. But in mysteries like this, absence becomes its own force. Every missing page is a door left half open. So when AI entered the story, it entered not as a gimmick, but as the newest weapon against a manuscript that had already defeated codebreakers, linguists, historians, cryptanalysts, and enthusiasts for generations. Break time 05s. And that raised an unnerving possibility. Maybe the problem was never that the manuscript had no pattern. Maybe the problem was that its pattern lived just beyond the threshold of ordinary human reading. The modern breakthrough did not begin with one miracle prompt and one stunned scientist. It began with digitization, computational transcription, and the slow conversion of a medieval object into machine-readable data. Once the manuscript's pages were photographed in high detail and its glyphs transliterated into standardized character sets, researchers could do what earlier generations could not: measure frequencies, compare word distributions, test recurrence, map positional behavior, and examine whether the text resembled known linguistic systems at scale. In that sense, AI and adjacent computational tools changed the field. Break time 05s. They made it possible to ask not just what does this symbol mean, but how does this system behave as a whole? One highly publicized moment came from University of Alberta researchers Greg Kondrak and Bradley Hauer, whose work used algorithmic methods to guess a possible source language behind the manuscript. Their approach generated headlines suggesting the Voynich had been decoded, with Hebrew proposed as the most likely candidate. It was exactly the kind of breakthrough the internet had been waiting for. AI meets history's most unreadable book, but the actual scholarly reaction was much colder. Experts argued that the method relied on modern language training data for a medieval manuscript, assumed an anagram system that is not accepted consensus, break time 05s, and produced speculative matches without a strong framework for evaluating how meaningful those matches really were. Critics also noted that the resulting translation required interpretive adjustments and even external machine translation. In short, the method generated a provocative hypothesis, not a solved mystery. That distinction matters because it reveals what AI can and cannot do. AI can cluster patterns. It can compare symbol sequences across enormous corpora. It can test whether a text behaves more like language than noise. It can identify recurring structures a human reader might overlook. It can even generate plausible hypotheses about source languages, section boundaries, scribal habits, or thematic organization. But AI cannot conjure ground truth from absence. If there is no bilingual key, no securely known language, breakpoint 5s, no agreed transcription, and no external reference text, then even the strongest model is operating inside uncertainty. It can estimate, rank, and suggest. It cannot simply know. And large language models, especially when prompted dramatically, can produce fluent interpretations that feel revelatory while resting on fragile assumptions. That is why the real Discover Sub was subtler than viral videos suggested. The most credible computational work did not translate the manuscript into a terrifying message from beyond the stars. It did something both less flashy and more important. It strengthened the case that the Voynich text may contain genuine structure. It suggested that the manuscript is not easily dismissed as meaningless noise. That is not the same as cracking the code, but it is enough to keep the mystery alive with renewed force. Break time 05s, and once that happened, the cultural imagination took over, because in the public mind, I found structure quickly became I found language. Then I found language became I found hidden meaning, and for some, hidden meaning became forbidden knowledge. That is how a medieval manuscript becomes, once again, combustible. And this is where the story becomes larger than the book, because the Voynich Manuscript now sits at the intersection of three powerful modern forces: ancient mystery, machine intelligence, and public appetite for revelation. For scholars, caution is mandatory. A false decipherment does real damage. It distorts public understanding, muddies future research, and rewards confidence over method. That is why institutional voices tend to move slowly. Libraries catalog, researchers test. Break time 05's experts argue in increments. In a world trained by viral certainty, that slow discipline can look like hesitation. To conspiracy-minded audiences, it can even resemble suppression. But from the scholarly side, restraint is not secrecy. It is quality control. Still, the hesitation has consequences of its own. Every time experts say, "Not proven," the vacuum fills with louder voices. YouTube channels, social threads, AI demonstrations, and speculative commentators rush into the gap. Some frame the manuscript as lost science. Some frame it as esoteric medicine. Some leap toward non-human origin stories because the imagery feels alien and the script feels sealed. The less definitive the evidence, the more fertile the imagination becomes. That is how disagreement escalates from academic problem to cultural drama. Break time 05s. Within the technical sphere, the caution is equally serious. The Voynich Manuscript is a nightmare dataset. The corpus is limited. The transcription systems are not perfect. The relationship between glyphs and sounds, if such a relationship even exists, is unknown. Sectional variation might reflect topic shifts, scribal hands, encoding changes, or something else entirely. Missing leaves fracture context. And because there is no accepted answer key, model outputs are hard to validate in the strongest possible sense. A system may produce elegance without truth. In that environment, expert disagreement is not a flaw. It is the honest shape of the evidence. Some linguists see enough internal consistency to suspect language. Some cryptography-minded researchers suspect layered encoding. Break time 05. Some skeptics remain open to the possibility that the text performs meaning without necessarily carrying much of it. None of those positions can yet eliminate the others. And then there is AI itself. The stronger the model, the greater the temptation to believe it has crossed from pattern recognition into understanding. That temptation is especially dangerous with ancient materials. A modern model trained on massive bodies of text can produce confidence far beyond what the source data deserves. When it sees the Voynich Manuscript, it does not enter as a neutral archaeologist. It enters carrying the statistical shadow of humanity's recorded language. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it imposes familiar structure on something genuinely unfamiliar. So the stakes are now double. If AI eventually helps unlock even part of the manuscript, Break time 05s, it could reshape the study of undeciphered texts and demonstrate a new partnership between historical scholarship and machine analysis. But if AI merely becomes a factory for persuasive overinterpretation, then the Voynich Manuscript will have taught a harsher lesson. Not that the past is unreadable, but that modern tools can make false certainty feel irresistible. The most responsible way to approach the Voynich Manuscript is not to force one answer, but to sit inside the competing explanations and see what each one can actually account for. The conventional explanation is that the manuscript is a real 15th century work containing meaningful content in some encoded, constructed, or currently unidentified linguistic system. Under this view, the illustrations and text belong to a coherent intellectual project, perhaps medical. Break time 05's herbal, astrological, or natural philosophical. Computational evidence supporting structured word behavior gives this interpretation real strength. It does not solve the text, but it supports the idea that the manuscript may be saying something genuine. The alternative theory is more radical, but still terrestrial, that the manuscript is a deliberately engineered artifact of obscurity. It may be a private cipher, a constructed language, a knowledge game for elite readers, or a manuscript designed to preserve secrecy through complexity rather than through ordinary encryption alone. In this reading, the strange plants and diagrams may be composites, mnemonics, or intentionally transformed imagery. AI could be useful here not because it translates the book, but because it might identify design principles humans have missed. Then there is the skeptical position that the manuscript may be, in whole or in large part, a sophisticated hoax or meaning-light artifact built to impress, mystify, or attract patronage. The old version of that theory imagined more or less random nonsense. But modern skepticism can be more nuanced. A text may carry local structure without carrying deep semantic content. It may imitate the behavior of language without actually being one. The existence of statistical regularity weakens the simplest hoax argument, but it does not eliminate all skeptical models. And finally, beyond scholarship lies the fringe interpretation, that the manuscript reflects knowledge outside normal human history, whether ancient advanced science, suppressed contact narratives, or something extraterrestrial. Break time. This interpretation has emotional power because the manuscript really does look uncanny. But power is not proof. No credible evidence currently demonstrates alien origin, alien contact, or a hidden official confirmation of such ideas. Those claims remain speculative storytelling, not verified conclusion. What makes the Voynich Manuscript so enduring is that each explanation captures part of the truth while failing to close the case. The conventional view explains the discipline of the text. The alternative view explains the opacity. The skeptical view explains the danger of overreading. The fringe view explains the emotional charge, but not the evidence. And so the manuscript remains exactly where it has lived for centuries, between signal and projection. Why does this matter so much? Break time I5s because the Voynich Manuscript is no longer just a medieval puzzle. It has become a test of how modern civilization handles the unknown. A real book survives. The makers are gone. The context is shattered. The symbols remain. And now the most advanced analytical systems humanity has ever built are being asked to stand before that silence and explain it. That confrontation reveals something uncomfortable. The past is not obligated to be legible. Data is not the same thing as understanding. And intelligence, human or artificial, can still mistake pattern for truth. The manuscript matters because it exposes the limit between decoding and meaning. A machine may sort every glyph, a scholar may trace every folio, a camera may capture every pigment, and still the central gap remains. What was the author trying to say to whom? Break times O5s, and why hide it so well that 600 years later the world still cannot answer? Maybe that is why the Voynich Manuscript feels almost supernatural. Not because it proves anything beyond Earth, but because it confronts modern confidence with a fact older than the internet and stronger than hype. Some things can be authentic, documented, physically present, and still remain profoundly unread, so the manuscript waits, not defeated, not solved, not dismissed. A has not delivered a final translation. But it has done something almost as provocative. It has shown that beneath the Voynich Manuscript's surface may lie an order too deep for casual explanation and too fragile for reckless certainty. And that leaves the world with one final question. If the Voynich Manuscript is truly speaking in a structured voice, who exactly has been unable to hear it? Medieval history, modern scholarship, or the machines now trying to listen? Because perhaps the most unsettling possibility is not that the book came from somewhere beyond humanity. It is that it came from us. And we no longer remember how to read our own past. If there is a theory the audience finds most convincing, lost language, encoded science, elaborate hoax, or something stranger, the comment section is where the next layer of this mystery begins.